I'm really happy to share this movie with all of you right here in Chicago, my hometown. This is where I got started, went to school, started working as an actor and director. So let's watch the movie, and I'm going to be back with a special guest from the film to do a Q&A. See you all there. Thank you.
Our planet is a home to many wondrous species. It is a unique system that precisely balances the necessary elements to create and sustain life.
All right, thank you. And now we're very pleased to welcome the director, Kevin Mukherji, and Madeline Bernstein from the LA. I'm going to get the acronym wrong, but the Anti-Cruelty Prevention Society.
Yeah, we'll Okay, thank you everyone for coming tonight. And I'll just start by saying this is a movie from the bottom of my heart. I've been gathering footage for this for most of my adult life. And then I've done some short films about documentaries about animal welfare in the past. And then a few years ago I was living in LA, and I was thinking about doing something in a feature length. And I had some footage, but I really wasn't sure how I was gonna present the subject, because there are a lot of documentaries about animal welfare. I wanted to do something different. So one day I was driving down in LA, actually in the Hollywood section on Hollywood Boulevard, and I pulled up behind this city bus. And in the back of the bus there's a big sign for something like, help me out with this, something like...
something like it starts with something small.
Then it becomes
and then it
that.
becomes big. It had a little dog and a big person.
Oh, who was the guy laughing when we talked about Jeffrey Dahmer? Who was that? Come on, raise your hand.
I think they left.
They left. Oh, thank you.
They left, they were up here.
Just curious. I have no feelings. It's okay.
So anyways, I saw this sign. It's from SPCLA. At that time, I didn't know too much about the organization. So from my car on the cell phone, I called the number, and I told them, I'm interested in making a movie. I want to talk to you guys about this movie. I left my number. Then a few days later, I got a call back from this lady. She said that I'm Madeline Bernstein's assistant. I didn't know her then. Now we're friends. And then I spoke with her, and shortly after that, we started videotaping her interview. It was almost like 40 hours of interview, and from that I started, it was just Madeline's interview, and I started cutting it down, and that's how we came up with the blueprint, or in other words, the script for the movie. Because when you have a narrative film, you have a script to work off. In a documentary, we didn't, but my interview with Madeline was that for me. And then we started talking to other experts to come in and kind of back up what she was saying. So that's basically how the movie got started. Down and over to Madeline.
That's me. Yeah, it was very exciting because at first we didn't know if he was just some sort of LA kook, who pulls over on the side of the street and says, I'm looking at this billboard, I want to make a movie. Everyone in LA wants to make a movie or a billboard. But, I think it's, I've seen it a couple of times, but never this particular version. And every time I see this, and the political landscape has changed, and certain facts in the community has changed, different parts of this pop out and seem to have different meaning. So to me, this film makes perfect sense, and I really hope that, that it's successful and that people hear it, especially against our current political landscape. There's a lot to be said here.
Absolutely, that's always been one of the, even before this election, we just wanted to get the conversation started. We wanted to create, kind of get the facts out there. I think a lot of people just do not know.
Right.
They knew they were going to do things differently. And it's like little things, like how the movie ended. We don't, regardless of what you do for a living, you don't have to be a filmmaker, it could be a gardener, it could, have a job, and it's how we do simple things that can really make a difference. It's like a little drop of water and the ripple effect.
Right.
eventually.
And for me, one of the quotes in the film that really struck out tonight is our sliding into ignorance. For a long time, people have been saying, you know, climate science, I'm not a scientist, you know, there's no facts, or the people who are reading the papers are nerds, and book reading is being made fun of. And this has been going on, you know, for several years. And the first time I saw the film, I thought the theme was one thing. Now I actually think it's about the fact that as a country, we're becoming morons. And people aren't reading. They're getting facts. While the internet is useful, they can't discern truth from facts. I tried to explain the Britannica to my kids one day when they were complaining that they had to work so hard researching on the internet, and I started talking about dragging my ass to the library to pick up the books, to go to the Xerox machine, and after I worked up a sweat explaining that, then they said, well, why didn't you just call somebody for help or look it up? And I'm like, we didn't always have cell phones. And so, you know, I'm 139 years old, and I'm feeling like we're getting really ignorant. I mean, as we're sitting here tonight, websites are being scrubbed of scientific data. Nobody wants to take the time to learn something on their own, and they're just listening to their own echo chambers. And it's the ignorance theme now that, you know, you're ignorant of poverty, you know, you're ignorant of how other cultures are, you're ignorant of what's really going on, you're ignorant of, you know, how food gets on your table. I mean, to me now, I've changed my feeling about what this film is about tonight. It's interesting.
I think the movie evolved for us when we started working on it, you know. I think actually the movie changed us too as we were making it, and the movie kind of took a life of its own. It started out as an animal welfare, then it became human. I mean, we have so much footage. I think we have enough for another few, you know, films, you know, about animal welfare and human rights issues and women's rights and so on.
Right, it used to be primarily violence, because I used to be a prosecutor in the Bronx. I know none of you could hear that accent. And, you know, and so I was astounded at the relationship between animal abuse and then violence towards people, and that how every serial killer, joking about Jeffrey Dahmer aside, started with animals, and how it exists in almost every violent crime. There's always, and just 2 years ago, the FBI, now I'm on a committee where the FBI finally is counting animal cruelty as a crime in and of itself instead of lumping it as other, so they can actually track you know, the importance of animals. So I thought that was what the movie, when we started, that was, you know, my soapbox that I bored everyone with.
Absolutely.
It's different. It's changed.
It is, yeah.
It's changed.
We'll open up to if you guys have any questions about the making of the movie or.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
It's my birthday this weekend, and I was gonna have chicken. I might have just salad.
M&Ms are okay.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Back there?
I have a question. How do you maintain a sense of optimism when you look around you? You have put together a tremendous group of images, and from those of us who have a biology background and feel that the way people are made up of is very difficult to change, if possible at all. I happen to believe the last guy who says we're going to go extinct, he's correct in my opinion. How do you maintain a sense of optimism?
Great question, thank you. You know, as a filmmaker, let me tell you, kind of in depth, it was very difficult for me to edit this movie. I edited this movie in the back room in my office, back in my house in LA, and many morning I just would have a really difficult time getting up and getting started because I knew I'm going to have to watch through literally 20, 30 hours worth of really, really, you know, cruel footage. And actually, earlier in the process of the editing, we actually had a cut that I know you had a lot of good recommendation about, but we had a lot of those footage that I eventually took out. And the second thing that you said You know, everybody that I interviewed for this movie, they all said the same thing. We do not have another 200 years. And I just didn't want, I just kept that one, but everybody else kind of said the same thing. And actually Mrs. Gandhi, Monica Gandhi, she was probably edited the most because a lot of the things that she said I agreed with, but I'm not sure that in 2017 people are gonna believe her and may think she's gonna, off her rockers. But I think in the next 20, 30 years, I have a feeling everything that she said is gonna come true. And so on the DVD version, we're probably gonna have a lot of those footage.
I also think that's a good question. I think it's hard to be optimistic, and in my life, I've never been anywhere or seen anything pleasant, But I think because I've always had the kinds of jobs that are just all about violence of one sort or another, but I think what ends up happening, which is kind of the problem, is that when you stop being optimistic, you look at the world, you look at the images in this film, and you think, what's the point? And then people shut that out, and they just concentrate on their families, and they concentrate on their little areas. And then that in it itself perpetuates the problem of shutting the rest of the world out, and it continues the cycle. I hope there's some thought here about how to break that cycle, but I think you need optimistic people to do that. And I don't think there's a simple answer.
Yes, you've been great, yes. Go ahead.
I just want to say, amazing film, you guys. Really loved it, powerful message. Kevin, what was the first thing that planted the seed that made you want to make a documentary like this? What was the thing what was the image or a story? What was it that made you want to make this into a movie where you said, I want to collect footage and I want to make this into something I really care about? What was the first?
Well, we're all kind of in a way shaped by our childhood. It goes back to when I was about 10 years old. I was living in India, that's when I came to Chicago. And basically when I was 4 or 5, my parents already filed the paper to come here legally for immigration. But I grew up as an only child, and I begged them to get me a dog. And they keep telling me, maybe you should wait until we get to Chicago because you're going to leave India and you're going to have to leave your dog behind. It's going to be really tough. But I didn't listen, I was stubborn. And they eventually got me a dog on my birthday, maybe I was 5 or 6. Dog lived with us for 4 years, and when I was about 10, we immigrated to the United States, and everything coming here was the best thing that obviously happened to me and my parents. The only negative thing was leaving my dog behind. And that kind of planted that seed,
Right.
And also, the dog survived for many years, but he wasn't kept in a positive environment. He was literally tied up on the side of a busy street in Calcutta, which is kind of an overpopulated city. And I went back to visit the dog 6 years later, then 2 years after that he passed away. So that all is kind of stayed in the back of my mind, And then I grew up, got into filmmaking. I made a number of short movies about animal welfare. And then, like I was saying, a few years ago, I wanted to do something in a longer version. And that's where it kind of all came together. By the way, in the movie, there's all moving images. There was 2 still shots of a dog in a chain. That's the dog that I'm referring to. That's my dog back in India. Yes. Yes, sir.
Before I came tonight, I had asked my son, what is the movie about? And I remember him mentioning it's about cruelty to animals. But I like the way it evolved from cruelty to animals to our fellow humans and violence in general. And also, it's a great movie. I don't usually watch movies that are informative, but this one was really good. But what I was wondering was, do you think by having an animal as a child, it could turn people who would potentially be cruel individuals to maybe not be cruel? Or do you think they just kill their little pet anyways? I mean...
I think it helps having a pet as a child. I think it helps reinforce empathy aside from the responsibility. We have programs that are unique in our organization, in the country. We have a juvenile court diversionary program, the only one in the country, that works with kids that are convicted of things like animal cruelty, bullying, stuff like that. We're in the at-risk population with a copyrighted program we sell worldwide that tries to take kids, even if they didn't have a pet and they're not allowed to have a pet, in at-risk communities to do nothing but try to reinstill empathy where it's been lost. And just by some of the secret sauce in the program and teaching them how to train animals and giving them tools for anger management and how to resolve confrontations with words and not hitting. We have various programs. Our programs are very violent, anti-violence based. You can see anecdotally, and you can see the reports we get from the schools, and in the court program we can see by the lack of recidivism and reoffending that once you start to get this feeling like if I do that, it will hurt. And would I like that to happen to me? And in concert with some verbal tools, it does seem to make a difference. And I can't stand here and swear that we have the cure for violence. We're actually looking to get some of this now third-party evaluated because everyone is seeing it. But I do think having a pet helps, and I do think even if you don't, having a pet when you need one helps. And I think there's something to be said for that, other than the lower blood pressure and all the other stuff, you know, that medical journals are saying about the benefits of pet ownership. Empathy, I think, is the key.
It's interesting because you mentioned, and maybe it would help people to think more about what we do to our animals. You mentioned how people who, because when I was younger, I used to eat a lot of hamburgers and all that kind of stuff. And you mentioned how it leads, and you mentioned 3 different things: cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancer. And I've dealt with all 3 of those. I wish my parents would have seen your movie 60 years ago. It would have been helpful, but it was very informative. I really enjoyed this movie.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
So I have a comment and a question. First of all, I'm going to go slightly political, sorry. My comment is that if there was ever a time we needed a film like this, it's now. I feel like there's a climate of hate, and it scares me a little, and I think that this message is powerful, and I'm so glad you did this. But I also am wondering, I know it took you a few years to do this, and you mentioned that the meaning of the film has shifted for you or changed a little or progressed. I'm wondering how the election over the last couple of years maybe influenced you, and if you changed anything, maybe the way you edited the film or the message.
Actually, no, this version was completed before the last election. And I don't mean to get political, but this is not the country that I grew up in, so that's, so it's pretty scary. I agree with you. But this was finished about 6-7 months before the election.
But it is almost like the fulfillment of a prophecy. I mean, it's not that he's saying I told you so, but it does feel like that on some level, that we've seen the patterns. He sort of laid them out. And I can't make any political statements. I'm president of a nonprofit. But we see it coming to pass. The warnings, right? The warnings that were out, for a century, or, well, way longer than a century, but sort of since the evolution of the idea of preventing animal cruelty in the United States is only about 150 years old. But you're seeing the fulfillment of that prophecy.
It's interesting you talked about when you started your organization, your organization, you guys work for women's rights, right?
Right.
And can you imagine it's coming back? We're going to going back.
Right. And children, because we preceded the child labor laws, and we preceded social services. I mean, it's a very old organization, but it's all coming back. And the sex trafficking piece, which is the first time, actually, I've seen some of that.
This version.
Some of that section. I was just in San Francisco at a conference, at a law conference. It was the ABA conference, and the biggest keynote had to do with the sex trafficking issue. I mean, how prevalent it is worldwide, but one of the places where it's the most prevalent is at the Super Bowl. And that's kind of interesting if you think about what's going on. And we have a domestic violence program that we started in the 90s, and now we've put the tools out online for other people to manage it. Our intake spikes as soon as the first exhibition football game starts. And then it abated a little bit, and during playoffs, we were inundated. And at the Super Bowl itself that day, at the end of the game, we're probably gonna see another intake. And, I don't mean to say that everything is at the Super Bowl, but if you see all the pieces that, the entertainment required for the people at the Super Bowl and the players and the trafficking, and the violence that happens in the house during the game and after the game, and all this other stuff, it's all, I hadn't seen that piece before. It's fascinating.
Go ahead.
Kev, I know you guys had Forrest Whitaker did a great job as narrating. Were there any other options of narrators in case Forrest Whitaker couldn't do it?
Yeah, absolutely. We had a cut down when it finally went down to 90 minutes. I actually did all the voiceover just to put the movie together, and then we made me and my producing partners, we made a list of people, a short list. I think there were 6 names, and fortunately 5 of the 6 people agreed to do it. And then we went with Forrest because I had a relationship with him. We've been buddies for a long time, and I worked with him and directed him in the past. And then he also came in as a producer of the movie, executive producer. But I still had to go through his agents and his managers and his people told him that he better do it before someone else does. And the other 5 people who agreed to do it are basically same caliber as him, 4 other actors and an actress.
And I'm not a student of biology, but I do believe in being optimistic, and I do believe in the goodness, basic goodness of human beings. But my question is, other than empathy, would you suggest that if at an individual level, by forgetting, let's forget about what he's doing or she's doing or they're doing, but at an individual level, if we try to do maybe just a little bit outside of just me and my family unit, would that help?
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? You can start small, work, and that will influence your immediate family. Then maybe the neighbors. It's like I say, it's like a drop. I know it seems kind of overwhelming, but absolutely, start small, and eventually it will spread. You can influence other people through your good deeds. You can influence other people by kind of showing them the way.
It's like that old saying, do one random act of kindness, but the reason that works, and I try to tell people, is you're mentoring. Anytime you can mentor a positive thing, even if you look to the right, you see your kids standing there, and then you deliberately choose to do a positive thing at that moment because they're watching. Anytime you can mentor something positive, it ripples, and they remember that, and it makes a difference because it's more meaningful for them to see something in an image and remember it than to have me tell you. So if I tell you, you have to be nice, but you go down the street and you see somebody helping somebody in distress, that's going to have a greater impact.
It seems that once offenders to animals realize there's been a misstep, there's an easy rehabilitation process that follows subsequent. What are we doing to prevent or be proactive to help them kind of recognize the path they're on before they finally get there? Are you doing things?
The studies have shown, first of all, any of the programs that we have and some of the things I'm talking about reinstilling empathy, they're not going to work on psychopaths, okay? So there's a certain point after which there is no help. They need to be off the street. But the studies have shown that you can see evidence of animal cruelty as early as preschool. And not only that, he talked about the homicide triangle or the triad, but it's a predictor of violence. But you can also see as kids emulating what they're seeing in the house. A lot of kids that are being cruel to animals are themselves being abused. And there's other stuff going in the house. There's, all sorts of deviant stuff going on in the house. So 2 things you can learn at a very young age, which is something happening to this child that we can intervene and deal with now before things get worse? And is this behavior something that we can reverse? The studies have shown that if you start early enough, you can. The last place you can help them is usually around 7th to 9th grade. After that, they become very close to being legal and very close to being throwaways. So sometimes, if it's an aberration, or you can re-educate an adult, it will work. But the trick is to stop it at an earlier age, before they've had that major misstep, before they've been incarcerated for a long period of time. We do go into incarcerated junior high schools where they're living there, and we work on this program quite a bit, because that really is the last place where you have the highest chance of success. Your best chance is preschool. Your last chance is junior high.
Yes, but
Completely lighthearted, not gonna lie. Okay, so while making this film, did either of you or anyone on the crew end up adopting all the animals? 'Cause I really want that black lab. Like, I'm just saying,
He
yeah.
looks sweet.
It's so sweet.
well, I wanted to. That's what.
That beautiful golden retriever is mine.
Aww.
And the doggy tour stand. That's mine.
Aww.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll pick up on that question is, you're talking about negative climate, but one thing that has happened that's good is the amount of activism, people getting involved in a lot of things. That's the positive thing that's come out of this political climate, and that you see throughout this movie, and Madeline could probably address Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey. The premier circus on earth, they're not going to be any more after May. And also, in terms of animals, you have this big star followed by millions of people. Jon Stewart had The Daily Show. Him and his wife, they had all this attendance towards the hearing on their sanctuary on the East Coast. And they're like a light for people that want to do similar things in terms of speaking towards animal cruelty and animal sanctuary. So we have these, I don't think it's a coincidence, we have these big things that kind of happen. You have the light in the animal sanctuary world, and you have the demise of the Ringling Brothers circus. So you probably know how many different complaints and how long that took to Ringling Brothers. This wasn't something that just happened over a year.
No, I mean, Ringling Brothers I'm particularly excited about, because it was the very first day of my very first job in the animal welfare world when I was sent down to Madison Square Garden because Ringling Brothers had a unicorn. And the unicorn was a goat with a horn surgically planted in its head. And I actually called for the first boycott of Ringling Brothers back then. And it because of the unicorn. And of course it started, it took a long time. I had nothing, I'm not responsible for all this, but the building of the activism on some of the issues started from some of these more ridiculous, they thought they could do anything they wanted, and they went that far as to surgically, make a unicorn. And I thought, there was like a 5-year-old sitting there whose parents worked at the circus, and I said, what does that look like to you? And he goes, a goat, So like, who are they fooling? But the problem still is, and it's back to the theme of this film, with all that activism, and Jon Stewart was great. I was actually on his show. He did a puppy mill show, which was pretty hilarious, if you could be hilarious about puppy mills. But what's still missing is the interconnectivity. What's still missing is I'm still fighting every day to get an animal activist. If you're gonna go out there and say, don't leave animals in hot cars, right? I always say, and kids, right? Don't, do X to animals and the environment. And I think, what's really appealing to me about Kevin's film is that we've got to break down these silos. So the activism is good, but it can't be one issue activism. The point is, you have to include everything else in it to the extent possible, so that you don't want to dilute your own ability to be strong, but at least mention an awareness that you're affecting the rest of the planet, or you could be affecting kids, or you could be affecting something other than just your own cause. And I think when that starts to happen, I think we'll really be cooking.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Kevin Mukherji and Madeline Bernstein. About the movie. Next Wednesday, that's February 1st, the same. Be back here for that. But and thank you so much.